Yes, welcome back. This is F Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16, and no, Brat is not what I be, but you know who I am, and you can't see me. Yes, we're still talking about the Brat and her debut album, which just turned 30 years old, 1994's Funkdafied. Right? We are gonna jump into this category 2 breakdown and review. We go over the rap performance on this album. And if you haven't already, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. Go visit the Rap Ruler where you can leave your rankings on this album. You can vote and let us know what you think, or you can just drop them in the comments. It's all good either way. But the Rap Ruler is where you need to be. Just go visit it anyway. All right. With that, I'm just going to jump right into it. The first dimension we talk about in category 2 is dimension 1, personality and charisma. Now, I referenced in the first video that the Brat just had it. She had the je ne sais quoi, the swag, that factor that made sense why Jermaine Dupri was like, okay, thank you for bringing it to me, Crisscross. I'm gonna go, I got it from here. I know what to do with her. I mentioned how when you watch the Give It To You video, if you watch any of her videos from that era, this was just in her. You can tell she exuded confidence. She exuded rap, that hip-hop lifestyle. It wasn't performative or try hard in any way. And because of that, there's also this thing that she does with her style of rap. As abrasive as she's getting, there's a smoothness to it. There is this balance of masculine and feminine energy that goes into the Brat persona. And I know she's usually brought up in the conversation of rough, rugged, butch type of female rappers, but there's always been this apparent dance of both elements with her, and I don't think she runs away from that. I think she embraces it. She calls herself a woman. She speaks about her womanhood and being, that chick, but not in a feminine forward kind of way, and not in a girl power kind of way, but also like, yeah, I can hang with y'all and I'm probably better than y'all. Who gonna question that? Who gonna test it? And because of that, she masters the art of her confidence not sounding cocky. How that's done, not quite exactly sure, because this is definitely an album full of braggadocio. That is the main agenda of this album. But I think because there's an element of laissez-faire, just kind of like, hey, whatever, I'm just going to smoke. At the end of the day, it's the same way that Snoop was threatening but non-threatening. When people thought about the most scary or dangerous rappers of the time, Snoop wasn't the first name to come up in the conversation. I explained to some of the younger folk, I think I was talking to my nephew or someone, about Snoop's image now compared to his image then, and it was obvious that Snoop always had like this old soul and kind of warm, lovable element to him, even though he was saying this crazy gangster stuff. Same kind of thing here. You could tell the Brat had a heart. She had a code. She only cared about this, that, and that. But she wasn't going to try to slaughter anybody. And it's evident on the songs throughout the album. We'll talk about that in the next dimension. But there's charisma because she's able to laugh on songs. She's able to kind of tell you what she likes, what she doesn't like. And she makes some choices that magnify and amplify that. She escapes the boringness or the I'm going into something extra on this album. But all of that is something for you to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Y'all tell me if y'all picked up on any other elements of Miss Shantae Harris's personality on this album, which takes us to dimension 2, the believability or the suspension of disbelief. I mentioned her government name, but she doesn't really make any distinctions on this album between Shantae and the Brat. She doesn't even say her government name. That's just me being slick. There's not this idea that this is a character or persona, which, as I mentioned in video 1, unlike a lot of the female rap acts that were coming out in the early 90s that mostly seem to be contrived, whether it's conscious or going for this shock value, she's saying some pretty strong stuff, and she's cursing a hell of a lot. But there's only one song where she's talking about straight up violence, and that's Ain't No Thing, where she's talking about some criminal activity or, you know, bringing bodily harm to fools. Other than that, it's talking about damage on the mic, and I think that helps with making what the Brat is selling digestible compared to other female rap acts that tried to do the gangster route or the rough, rugged route, because they talk about Glocks and all this stuff. She's not going hard in that direction. It's more about, don't challenge me, chump. I can outsmoke you, I can out-rap you, and I'm cooler than you. And where the believability comes in, because she's staying in that lane and she sounds like she means it, and her confidence doesn't go into this cocky territory or this unlikable mean girl territory, it worked. Again, because the album's short, that might also have a lot to do with it. You're not like beat over the head with the same point where you're like, okay, the Brat, we heard you. That helps. But because she's really just talking about these very simplified, easy to understand, easy to picture things that don't exceed her stature or her look, that's really important. Not deceiving your look and betraying it with what you're saying helps. She's not trying to sell you sex dressed the way she is, and she's also not trying to sell you super gang, blam blam, or any of that really with her look, but she's somewhere in the middle. She's selling you tomboy. She looks like a tomboy. She's giving you that yin and yang dance of feminine and masculine, and she's selling you smoker, and she looks like that's what she does without the unpretty parts of that. Because she's not like a black lip rapper, right? And so, yeah, that's all of that is something to consider. None of her guests go beyond that. I did mention YT from the Bush Babies comes in and raps a little harder than he does, but because it's reggae influence and people are not as familiar with the individual members of the Bush Babies at any point in their career, because of that, it doesn't really turn heads or record scratch or anything like that. Most non-Caribbeans don't really understand the wording of patois and reggae style rap anyway, so it's like, okay, it probably went over a lot of people's heads. So beyond that, none of the guests take the Brat out of that space either, or like, you know, interrupt the agenda and the flow of the album with what they're saying. All of this, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you're thinking about the believability or suspension of disbelief on this album. Takes us to dimension 3, delivery and the use of voice. So this is a huge component of that confidence and charisma that I talked about with the Brat, is how she's saying things. There is an accent there. We were not as region-minded in 1994, so it didn't matter. You didn't really think about the fact that she's an Atlanta-based artist that's repping Chicago, or when she's saying West Side, she's about the West Side of Chicago. Again, California hip-hop is all the rage here. When she says West Side, a lot of folk thought she was just another Cali rapper. She matched the look, she matched the sound, she matched the feel of it. We didn't care, because she was selling something that made sense with how she was serving it. We knew there was a twang there, but it wasn't country enough for you to think Midwest or South or West. It fit, but you knew it was something. You knew it wasn't New York, right? You knew it wasn't the tri-state area. So that flavors how she says certain things, right? She's not saying 60604. She's saying 60604. And that's coming in. She's doing things like saying big baby, tat-ow. And when we talk about that Snoop and Dogg Pound influence, she's doing a lot of the rhythmic things that we heard them do on their albums. Out of nowhere, she's going to go from that aggressive presentation, that you know, spitting it at you, to da 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 kind of thing in the middle of her verse. Her and JD also do some really interesting back and forth choices where he'll come in and just kind of do finishing a sentence. They do a call and response thing. Like I think about what happens on Ain't No Thing in the first track. Jermaine Dupri comes in and out and they like bounce off words. With Ain't No Thing, it's really interesting because structurally she ends each verse the same way. with that, I mentioned in video one that weird choice to go nigga and repeat it before I leave the same way I came. The ad lib is with a bang, and you'll see that all throughout Funkdafied where they go back and forth. But yeah, a lot, even when Jermaine Dupri comes in, a lot of those times it may be one sentence or one little phrase in the background, and it's like la da da da, and you'll hear la di da's, you'll hear dum diddy dum on this album. A lot of that Snoop and Dogg Pound influence is here, especially even in word choices. You're gonna hear her say, "Do you hear what I hear?" Something you heard Warren G say a lot throughout his career. Or loked out. Where loked out comes from in the Chicago or Atlanta context, when it's clearly a California phrase with sunglass and gang connotations, really interesting choice, but it's just riding the wave of what's out there. It's like this jargon is up for grabs. But because of that, also the Brat is not afraid to tap into the lighter uses of her voice. When you hear her singing, she sings sometimes. When you hear her chanting, she's not really singing. When you hear her chant, she's not afraid to tap into that. Her talking voice on that little interlude that comes on after Fire It Up. You realize something I didn't put too much thought in, but throughout her whole career, Brat's talking voice was kind of sexy, like if you really think about it. But she stays, that's what I mean about staying within her femininity on different points, right? She's not trying to talk like a dude. She's not afraid to do something like word up, hey, word up, hey. That's all her at the end. And again, not afraid to laugh. So you're getting all these shades and tones of her voice. You're hearing her be hard and abrasive on the first track, It Ain't No Thing. You're hearing her being a little bit more slick on Come and Get Some, Mind Blowing, Give It To You, and Funkdafied. And all of that dexterity is what you want from an artist. If you're gonna have to listen to them talk about the same thing throughout an album, at least deliver it in different ways. So those are all things to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you're thinking about the use of voice there. Takes us to dimension 4, the flow. All right, the Brat is one of the flow masters of the game. It's not as evident on this album because she's staying in a very neutral pocket, a pocket that works, a pocket that's very prevalent and relevant to the times. It's 94, but her flow is her own. And I think that's also what helped her escape being written off as a Snoop clone. She balances abrasiveness with her natural projected voice. That projection is not this character projection. It's just, oh, this is how I sound when I'm putting a little oomph behind my voice. Like my talking voice right now, if I'm rapping, I'm just going to be rapping like this. I'm not going to be like, hey, da 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 da, or da 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 da, right? So there's moments where she packs syllables. And as basic as I mentioned the first track being, there's a moment where she picks up and does a faster multisyllabic flow. And she's like, if you like it rough and rugged, then you love it. Play it, say it, day to day. You never ever get enough of it. That's a choice. Even if she was freestyling, she caught a cluster of rhyme patterns that all sounded pleasing together with the consonant sounds and the internal rhymes. There's another moment that's a little bit more staccato than that, which she does on Mind Blowing, and she goes, my shit, fly shit, why should I get mixed in the shuffle with these other chicks? In the midst of a flow that was more continuous before that, she decides to break it up like that. And she does that in and out with some of the sing-songy elements of flow. And there's moments where she gives you precursors, like foreshadowing of the faster flow that she would come to be known by. I think when a lot of people think of the Brat, they think of the rapid fire flow that's way more a tell of her early Twista influence and just her representation of her hometown, because it's my theory that most Chicago rappers grow up learning how to fast rap first and decide if they're going to rap slower. But it's like you have to pass that fast rapping test. And so I think of what she did on Funkdafied, where she's like, coming up at you like Ralph K, and since this ain't no honeymoon, I'm here to stay, right? Just that little pickup. That's the only time you're going to see that on this album, is in like little revving up moments, and then she brings it back down because the point was to make this very digestible. When her and Jermaine Dupri go back and forth, they do refrains for there's lots of refrains on this album actually, but they do refrains to tie all the verses together. So on Ain't No Thing, every verse ends the same, right? May the funk be with you. Every time she ends the verse, she says, may the funk be with you. I'm about to hit you. Something, something, something. May the funk be with you. Until the final verse where she says, and on your way, take the funk with you. Like, that's song making and songwriting. Like when I'm thinking about JD finishing and ending sentences for her and them going back and forth, the most popular example is the OG is what I am, or Brat is what I be. You know what and you can't see me. Like, cute in a nutshell. So they're from the old class of, look, this is the song structure, and song structure matters. You can tell from the way Manuel Seal is doing the hooks on this album. He probably had the hooks ready before the tracks were finished. It's like, hey, this is how the song's gonna sound. Brat herself in interviews has said that she prefers to write to a beat already, not write without a beat. Rappers have all different approaches. Some singers, some songwriters have different approaches. I've always been from that school of thought too. I want to be in with the beat. I want to be married and blended into the beat. That's what the Brat says works best for her, and that's how she writes, and you can tell it. That's another thing that sells the confidence, the charisma, the delivery, and the flow, is that you can tell music is living in the Brat. Like, she's one with the beat. She raps very in pocket. She never goes off beat, and she stays in there, and that makes it a very easy to listen to experience. All these things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to Dimension 5, the wordplay and bar intent. All right, just like the themes and the agenda of this album is really simplistic. The content's really simplistic. That's going to be the extent of the lyricism here. She's not hitting you with a bunch of rhetorical devices. The furthest you get with similes is going to be stuff like what she says on Mind Blowing, which is her most lyrical song on here, her most focused song. She says, exciting like gymnastics and harder than mathematics. Rudimentary simile there. Not a lot of metaphor, but there's cleverness in some of the slick talk here, right? On that same song, she says, you can't trace it because ain't no outline. You can't outrhyme. You can't route yours like I route mine. Nice with internal rhyme schemes in there, but all kind of saying the same thing. Lay back and listen as I catch up on my pimping and freak this duet just like Ashford and Simpson. That's your wordplay there. That's your simile there. On Mind Blowing, as lyrical as it is, she goes into some spaces where she starts making up words, which was kind of a popular thing to do if we think about the Keith Murray introduction to the game. But I can't tell if this was intentional or just from just lack of knowing. A lot of rappers were saying words wrong back then. And it continues, but she says, I obliviate. And then she goes a few sentences down from that and says energetical, funkadelical, but it sounded good, right? So that's your wordplay and bar intent. The intent is there. It's to destroy the mic. It's to let you know she's no joke on the mic. She's taking any and all contenders in competition. All right. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to Dimension 6. The quotability of this album. The punchlines of poetic wisdom. Now, I just talked about how not a lot of rhetorical devices being used there. Not a lot of metaphor, not a lot of simile. So naturally, the punchline thing is going to be limited. The Brat has never been touted as a big punchline rapper. I don't think she cares about that stuff. Doesn't mean they don't exist. You get some slick talk lines here. If you do it enough, you're guaranteed to get a few. Two stand out. On Ain't No Thing, she says, it's that nigga with no nuts, but you still going jive. Big talk. That's the kind of braggadocio you want a high quality rapper to give you. It's abrasive, it's vulgar, but you know, it's like, okay, you got to think about that for a second. Or you got to rewind and be like, did she just really say what I think she just said? And that kind of sums up Brat's presence too. It's like, I know I'm a woman, fool, but I still got more heart than you. Later on, she says on Mind Blowing, again, the most lyrical song on the album, she said, chant a wicked verse and rip your neck off like voodoo. Again, imagery, but you really got to think about that for a minute. You're like, oh yeah, the neck, voodoo, okay, I get it. It's not the deepest, but it's like, okay, this took a little bit more thought than some of the other straightforward stuff that she says for most of the album. Now, on the other end, because the content is limited here, you're not getting a lot of room for poetic wisdom. On the song Fired Up, she's giving you a description of what that smoker's life looks like. And so she says something that takes you into the space. And she says, like, here's the place where me and my crew go. In the summer, it's a pool. In the winter, it's a smoke hole. And so you can picture that stuff. You can picture the difference in the seasons. You can picture them being so devoted to this ritual that they'll do it whether it's cold or hot. And that's about that's about as deep as it gets when you talk about this album. Besides the other line that I mentioned where she says, why should I get mixed in the shuffle with these other, you know, I'm like, okay, that's another way of saying I'm special, I stand out, I'm a woman, but I'm a different kind of woman. So all of that is something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 when you're thinking about the quotability on this album, besides the obvious quotable fact that it comes from these songs being hits that last the test of time. Funkdafied and Give It To You in particular, people tend to know every line from that song. We used to perform that as a live band. I've heard it for karaoke. Funkdafied is a very fun song. The censored version, the uncensored, not so fun, but they are flowing. It is a very liquid, flowy type of song. They were in their pockets on that. All right, Dimension 7, the concepts. There are no concepts on this album unless you consider Fire It Up to be. There are conceptual aspects to some of the videos that came out, but on this album, as an audio body of work, made a funk be with you, just because they're playing off the funk theme and the idea of taking it with you. There's loose conceptual elements, to outline portions of these songs, like in the outlines of these songs, but not in the heart of these songs themselves. If you pick up on something that I didn't, please let it be known in the comments. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Takes us to the content. Dimension 8, the externalized content. How much is the Brat talking about outside of her scope, outside of herself and her autobiographical stuff? For that, same answer is going to be the answer you get for Dimension 9, the internalized content. She does not give you anything really revealing about her lifestyle except for the smoker element. She doesn't even tell you about her entrance in the game. She just is here, deal with it. And so, yeah, she describes Chicago. She's like, these are some of the things you'll see in the black neighborhood, barbecuing. This happens. That's the extent, man. There's no socio-political awareness being displayed on this album. There's no relationship talk, and there's no "this is my story." That's it. I'm here. So if you pick up on something that I did not, once again, leave it in the comments. Go rank it. Both of these dimensions on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Dimension 8 externalized and Dimension 9 internalized. Right, that takes us to the final dimension, Dimension 10, storytelling. All right, y'all know how it goes. I've been told it is not a classic album if it does not have at least one good story. This album has none. There are storytelling, narrative elements of Fire It Up. That is about it. That makes this album pretty devoid of a straightforward, hey, A to B story, beginning to end. Here's what happened. That is up to you if you consider that to be a weakness or a strength. But with that, we conclude our Category 2 breakdown and analysis and review of the classic album, which is now 30 years old. The history-making, groundbreaking debut by the Brat, Funkdafied. In the meantime, as JD would say, y'all know what it is. F a rap critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.